Hey guys, this is Shabam from StocksPoker.com. Today I'm going to be playing one table of 1530 limit Omaha high-low 6 max. I'll be focusing on isolation raises and aggression in position. So right away, I notice a few names: Jax 101 Poker, a very aggressive and smart player, as well as Unnamed 13, who has the same skill set, I believe. MJ Singer I've played a little bit heads up and is decent as well. The only person that I don't know is Blown Income, and I will look at their tendencies, pull up the histories when he or she is involved with the hand, and try and assess how he or she plays. Just going to wait one more hand to post the blinds. Already we can see four-way action, so this will be a very, very loose table. Especially with all these loose calls on the end, where it's very easy that a straight is leading out and they still call. Hopefully it shows me. I don't think it will. In these spots, rarely does a player ever lead when they have been quiet throughout the hand on a river card like this without an actual straight. Deuce 6 might, but it's highly unlikely as well with those many people in the hand. I'd expect that they'd want to get to showdown cheaply, as they could get raised by a 5-6 and still have the best low and not want to give up value, or sorry, call when they are beat. Ace 10 6 7 a raise in the cutoff. Ace 10 3 4 I'm going to 3-bet if he folds, especially with position. The Ace 10 is decent enough. So we flop the second nut low and an open ender on the bottom, and he instantly folds. King 6 7 7 I'm just going to let go. A new player has joined, another unknown player to me as well, Sandy Salmon. So essentially what I'm going to try and do in this video is isolate with two-way hands that will do very well heads up, because when we accomplish that, not only do we have dead money from the blinds, but have position and the flow control. And what I mean about flow control is that in a game where almost every card is potentially a dangerous one, players will usually check to the person who has control. So right now I'm just going to play tight out of position and try to be aggressive in position when it allows me to. It might be a little more difficult with players trying to achieve the same thing. Ace 10 Jack Deuce. We're going to raise up front. Very strong hand. And we're going to bet here. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to have the option on the turn. Usually it goes check call. We did pick up the nut low and a flush draw now, and he decides to check raise. Now my options here are to 3-bet or call. I am never ever folding here. So we have to ask ourselves, is he doing this with an ace deuce? And if he is, or if it's possible that he is, then our ace jack isn't doing very well. We do have a flush draw. I do think if he has a straight, he's going to check call on a flush, and he might even bet the river if the flush comes with an ace deuce. We have a brick and we're just going to call, hoping to get at least half. He did have a straight, and the reason why I don't like raising with the flush draw with no other immediate potential high hands is that we we're not essentially free rolling. He could have something like 3-4-7 and our nut low could get counterfeited. So in the end, I like calling there. 9-9 ace deuce, I'm just going to call in the big blind. Had I been in jacks or unnamed spot, I would probably 3-bet. Here we hit a deuce, which counterfeits our low, so we can't go runner, runner, low. And nines aren't strong enough to continue, so we're just going to fold there. And we have 8-8-8-4. It's never really good to have trips in your hand, so I'm just going to let that go. Even in a 2-3 blind structure with no one raising in position. Jack 6-7-9, fold here. And it gets capped 4 ways. So definitely a lot of aggression. And I might actually tighten up a little bit in this video and just try to comment on observed hands. So the board does pair after a couple straights come out, and he still has the lead. I'm assuming that he has it. That was quite strange, actually. I believe ace high ended up taking the high pot. I believe it did. I think when it gets capped, I think ace 3, you have to be really wary, especially 4-way when people are cold calling and 3-betting, and there's a lot of action on a board like this. I think that once you see the turn, your hand is strong enough to continue. However, I don't believe that leading out is the best strategy or the best line to take throughout the hand. And especially when the queen comes, other players might realize that there are possible other ace deuces out, so an ace deuce might even check and you might get a little more value for your hand. But if you definitely bet, you're going to get called 100% by ace deuce. They're not folding. Here we have Jack 3-7-8 double suited. I'm going to peel once just because his range is so wide. We did flop 2 pair with a 3 to pick up a low draw. However, I'm going to fold this if he calls, and the reason being is that this is just so draw strong. There are a lot of cards that will crush us, and oftentimes will be free rolled. So I will let this one go. I'm trying to sum up the last hand a little better with the ace 3. I wanted to say that some people think that because you've arrived at the river and you have ace 3, the best thing to do is bet, because if you're beat, you're going to check call 1-bet anyways, and if you're ahead, you get that bet in ahead. However, I'm going to fold here, ace king 7 jack. However, in this situation where players might be wary of another ace deuce, they might check it behind. The other problem with betting still on this river is that the board paired, and with the action, it is somewhat likely that someone has a full house and will raise, so you'll be costing yourself 2 bets, if anything, because you might still think that your low is good, and think that the razor might be only on the high portion. Ace Jack 6-8, I'm going to fold only because there's a limper under the gun. Had he folded and he raised, I probably would have 3-bet. And now Jack's 101 poker decides to take the lead. This is a new player. I didn't see sit down. I believe he replaced unnamed 13. And he decides to call down, and he still bets. It's going to be interesting to see what both players hold. And he has ace 8 deuce 3. So definitely Jack's 101 is mixing up his play. He expects that for the most part that Ritz It Up should have only high hands. So he decides to bet at what seems like a terrible flop for most hands that involve ace deuce and ace 3 in their hand. I think that he would have got away with it occasionally if the river was not a 5, making it much easier for ace king high to call, as it does counterfeit queen pairs and 9 pairs. So just taking a look at the last hand, we're going to replay it. It looks like Sunny flatted with what appears to be a weak hand. I can't quite remember what he had. I believe it was something like 9-5-6. I could be mistaken. Check raise. Bet call. And he checks. Check. Queen deuce 5-7. So he was trying to take it away, just like Jacks had done before. And I don't mind it too much on this flop. However, when he calls, there's no potential backdoor low. I'm pretty sure that he is saying that he's going to call, especially a player of this caliber where he likes to mix up his game. So I think that for the most part he's calling down, and I would just give up on the turn if I were him once he calls. Again, quite interesting here. I'm going to call here. I believe that his range is a little wider given his stack, and that I'm going to check raise this flop. I don't mind having a free card if it does go away, somewhat hiding my hand, and because I have the clubs to cover, so I'm not too worried about that. I will check raise here and continue, as I have a pretty strong hand. If raised, I will just call, and so queen comes, and I'm still going to fire. I should have the hand, the best hand here almost all the time, only losing to queen 7, I believe. Now he flats on the puck, and I'm going to complete. I don't think that he's able to raise with too much here. Flop comes king 7-7. Now I could bet and try and make a play at it. However, hands that limp the puck are often high hands, so it's very likely that he hit this flop, and he has position, so I'm just going to give it up. King 9-9. If it is folded to me, I will raise it. In any other situation, I will fold it. And it goes re-raise cap, and with the looseness of Sunny and a wider range with the opponent here. And I'm going to call here, and the reason why I'm going to do that is because I can control the pot. Had I raised and the turn came the seven of spades, I'd be somewhat scared to bet it, afraid of getting check raised. But it just allows him to attack a lot of boards here. So he does have the flush. They ended up both having the flush, so that's a unfortunate event for me. Had he had more money and led this, I'd play it the same way. However, I would just flat call here and go into call down mode if I did not improve. If he checked the river, I would then bet. So Jack's again 3-betting out of position. So it'll be fairly interesting to see what his range is. For me, the hands that I like to 3-bet are hands that play two-way and will be hard to scoop. So high aces with a low like ace queen 4 or high pairs with a low like king king 3 5 would fall into this range. But that's for isolation purposes. When you're multi-way like this, I'm more looking towards hands that have high equity, such as double pairs, high double pairs like king king jack jack or 8 9 10 jack, or strong ace deuce hands. So he ended up raising with ace deuce 7 7 and made quite a terrific call down. Again, Sonny tried to make a play, and I don't mind it on the way it played out. And the reason why I believe that's a better play than the last one is because the last one wasn't as connected. He raises under the gun, I have 9 9 deuce 6, I have $15 in, $10 dead. I'm just going to 3-bet and get it in against his range. I hit a very good flop, and assuming that a low does not come, I take the whole thing. However, it does, and we chop the pot. Now the reason why I like to play high double pairs, multi-way, and strong connected coordinated cards such as 8 9 10 jack is the reason because it's just so easy to get away with if we miss, and we'll usually know where we stand right away. It also merges our range when players start to figure out that we're raising pretty light, making it harder for the control to be taken away from us. So I definitely like how Jack's 101 Poker has been playing this session. I think that he is one of the best players to watch when trying to learn about this certain style of play. Queen deuce 4 6, even though we're on the puck and he is raising light, I don't think it's strong enough to 3-bet, especially with these guys calling so light. Now, I know some of the players that have been watching my previous videos have been asking me what exact range has enough equity to continue on. And honestly, I don't have a set range in mind. When you play enough hands, you start to get a feel for what you should be able to get to showdown with in regards of what range you're being called down by. So ace 10, 10, 3, had they raised, I would have 3-bet, and Jacks decides to fold. Ace 4, 6, 7, I am going to raise. Usually, sometimes I would fold. However, with the, I want to say, added benefit of these guys being short, they would 3-bet light, trapping this money. So I did flop ace-6 for 2 pair and mediocre low, and the reason why I want to bet is so that he can raise and I can get it in. So I end up counterfeiting him. The reason why I want to do that is so that he can raise and force him out, and I have a strong two-way hand there, so I definitely don't want it to be multi-way. I want it heads up because it's going to be hard to scoop both sides. And again, I'm doing the commentary live. I know some people suggested that I record it and then do it later. However, I think that I get my thoughts out more accurately than what I would if I were to go back and try and explain what I was thinking. I know the ums and the fastness of my speech is sometimes a little much for the users watching the video, so I'm trying to cut out those and slow down a little bit with my speech. The play has now gone five-handed. I don't really see anything wrong with both of those plays. Standard continuation bet. I check behind because there's a low out there. And I don't mind too much a bet here. 3-5 probably bets. 5-6 makes a straight. So it's gonna be hard for players to have a hand there. Your ace low's probably good in this spot. And if he has an other ace, weak ace, you might three-quarter him. With the queen, queen, 4-5, I definitely think that there's enough equity on this board to just check call down, assuming that it doesn't get too crazy with an ace coming on board. And it looks like a pair of nines takes this one. I didn't quite see it, but it looks like a big pot. There's 10 big bets in there. Don't know how that happened. Let's take a look. 3, 4, 4, 5. Under the gun, I believe he raised. It would be quite silly to limp under the gun there. I don't like a call here had he raised, and I definitely like a raise here. And not too bad with the ace queen 9-3. So let's see if he did raise, and that is the case. He probably 3-bet. Nope, he just decided to call. And a 3-bet here with ace queen 9-3. That's quite interesting. Now he decides to limp, and king king 9-10 does play quite well multi-way. So I'm going to limp here. He raises, and I am now going to call. King king 9-10 is quite easy to play when it is multi-way because you're not really going to be able to continue on without hitting the flop hard. Ace 8 deuce, my hand is completely killed, and I will fold there. So I check raise, check, he decides to lead into the pre-flop raiser, he calls, so I'm putting on him on 2-pair or strong aces, him with a low, and him with the nut low. And it looks like they both had the same hand as I was trying to get to. Unless he was making a play with 3-6, they should have 3-4 here. A check raise on the turn without the nut low is pretty much suicide and minus EV play. Now, if I was in this position, if I thought that I was able to get Sandy Selman out, which is a toss-up, you'd have to see how he's been playing, as it's not too obvious, but It seems that he has a strong high hand that he wants to try to get the showdown with. Because with the 3-4 in your hand and a pair of queens, you're not doing too bad against another 3-4. So I'm going to call out of the big blind with deuce deuce 4-4. I completely brick. Jack's 101 poker isn't the type that you can bluff too easily, so I'm just going to give up. I believe we would have went runner runner flush. No, I actually had one hard only. He ends up having ace queen 6-7 for a full house. And I see no fault in MJ Singer's play here. Jack's 101 poker has a wide range, so I definitely like the call down there. And I do like a check call on the river, as he's going to still fire as the turn gave a low. So if he has nothing, his best option is to still fire away. Leading here would get some curious calls from hands that you would beat. You're pretty much always getting raised by hands that do beat you. So again, I really like the way he played it. However, the pre-flop raise is kind of bad. And the reason is because you only have a one-way hand. There's only going to be a maximum of 3 players in the hand, so you're not going to get that much equity. And you're out of position against a very capable player. So I think I'm going to tighten up a little bit and pretty much let Jack's 101 poker demonstrate the skill sets of being aggressive, because he's doing a great job of flow control. And what you can see with his style is that people are being forced to check to his aggression, and if they continue to check, then they'll miss out on a lot of value, as there will be spots where he takes free cards, those times being where he probably has no fold equity or a draw, or they pay off in a guessing game just hoping that he does not have it. So it allows him to take the pot when their draws miss, because he will always put the last bet in, which is why it always pays. I'm not sorry, I can't use always, but it usually pays to be the aggressor in these type of games. King 5-5-7. He decides to limp under the gun. Three, 4, 8, 5, 7 is not strong enough, and there is very little high potential, so I will fold this. I do like his play with the deuce 5. You want to find out where you are relatively fast. So if he leads and gets raised, it's a safe bet that your low is no good and that you are chasing for the high on an open and straight draw. A little bit of bad luck for Sandy Salmon. He gets counterfeited on the turn, but gives him the second nut low. I really like how he played it, as MJ Singer will lead on most turns, allowing Sandy Salmon to raise. So I'm just going to say no to this waiting list. Ace Queen 6-7. I could 3-bet here, however Jex 101 decides to raise under the gun, which usually is indicative of a stronger hand. I would probably 3-bet if I want to say Ritz It Up raised or MJ Singer raised. And I will raise with Ace King 10-5, hoping to get heads up. And Jex 101 gives me a walk. And I believe that is because he is perceiving me to be tight, which I am playing tight. So when he does get involved in a hand with us, I believe that he will have a stronger hand than what he is showing against the rest of the players. So Ritzidups decides to check raise on a Queen Jack 4 board. Insta bets when the 9 comes, which gives 10 king the straight. Sandy Salmon raises, and he does indeed have the 10 king. King King Ace 8. Now in most games where it's tight, I would raise here. However, with the style that the table's been playing, I don't believe that this does too well. So I will fold here. If the Ace 8 was a little better with the low, then I would most likely raise it. And he ended up having 2 pair with Queen 4. And he decides to call down, which I don't mind too much, seeing how he might raise with Queen 10 here, or a combination of a flush draw and a pair, but even given the Ace of Diamonds, comes a little less likely. Queen 6-7-8, I'm just going to let go. The only way that I would call is if he flatted and he flatted. So if I can recall, it went raise, call, 3-bet cap. And in a capped pot, 2 aces come on the flop, which is a strong indication that these players are playing really, really loose. And even with this board and a capped pre-flop, they decide to call on here. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of hands that they decided to do that with. We only get to see 2. He flopped a full house with kings. I would probably take a little different line. I would probably just raise the turn. I don't think that's what happened. And then fold to a 3-bet, which kind of stinks, but it's probably an indication that you're beat. When you are raising so heavily pre-flop, they have to give you credit for a very strong hand as well. So it's very likely that you have ace king, and it'd be suicide for someone to 3-bet you back. I don't think calling down once you get to that spot is too bad either. Hopefully it gets a little ace king 3-6. He limps. Had he raised, I still would have 3-bet. With him limping, I'm going to raise. R3 gets counterfeited. I'm still going to continuation bet. We pick up top and bottom pair with a nut flush draw and an okay low, so easy bet again. And the way that MJ Singer has been playing, had he called, if he checked again, I would pretty much fire almost any card on the river. And the reason being is that when he completes his hands, he usually leads out, as we've seen before. So it's very unlikely that he would be going for a check raise or has a better hand than us. So we could feel pretty safe betting on the river if he checks. And if he leads with the same sense that he's been leading when he does hit, we would just call. So another new player has joined, Cartouche777. Again, I do not recognize him. He did raise out of position. And if he leads here, it's probably an indication that he has ace deuce. I don't see aces unless he had ace ace 4 leading there. Now I'm not quite sure what to make of this hand. If I were to venture a guess, I'd say that he flopped a straight and that he still has the nut low. It is worthy to take note that he decided to just flat with the nuts, which is, I think, the best play. King 3 5 6 gets you in trouble a lot of the times. I'm going to let this one go. Sandy Salmon decides to leave. And again, Jax 101 rarely checks and gets value out of kings. And I like this because not only does he have a lot of equity, but it's going to be pretty hard for MJ Singer to find a raise there. So I definitely like the way that he played this hand. And I do like MJ Singer just calling down, going to showdown cheaply. Against tighter players, I would opt to raise to try and get a free showdown. However, with a capable player like Jax, he's going to know that he has quite a bit of equity this hand and will 3-bet, which puts MJ Singer in a bad spot if he did raise. The play has now gone 4-handed, so we'll try and make the adjustment. We'll be playing a little bit more hands, which means that we will tangle a little bit more with Jax 101. Mikir seems to be a little more laid back and solid. And I don't think I have too many hands on Cartouche to comment on his play. Now he checks here, and I'm going to bet to one, represent a stronger hand, And if he has a high only hand, then I am doing quite well against that range. If he has something like King, King, Queen, 10, that would allow my 7 to be good for the low draw. And that's the reason why I bet there. Had he called, I would have just shut down completely unless improved. I think more people should take advantage of dry side pots to improve their equity, as this isn't a tournament, so you don't really gain anything by the other player losing. Ace deuce through 7. I'm going to raise. Mikir decides to call on the puck. And I'm going to lead with the nut low draw and what is probably the best hand. Another good thing about betting that last hand is that now Cartouche has a looser image of me, and I could see him paying off quite light in this pot. Instead, he ended up having a flush, and he showed great restraint, I think, by just check calling down. Jacks raises on the puck, so his range is quite wide, and again, this is a spot where we have enough equity, but it sucks if he does have a better hand. That's a killer hand, and I think the play now is to check fold. Most other cards I would just check call and get to showdown. And again, we're forced to fold to Jack's aggression. Now, Ace 4-4, I don't mind getting it in against a small stack. In almost any other situation, I would just fold. 4-4-5-5, I'm going to fold on the puck. And the aggression of Jacks 101 takes down the pot with Ace King high. King deuce 3-6, I'm going to raise. I think that he'll fold much more than what he has been doing before. Seems like he's trying to save her stack. And I will continuation bet here. He decides to lead. Now the problem with my hand is that his lead could consist of straight draws. It could consist of two pairs. So if I factor that into his range, if I hit two pairs other than the king, it probably won't be good. And if he has straight draws, it's very likely that he could have a jack 9 or a jack ace, which would kill my king as well. And it's going to be very hard to call with just bottom pair. I could go runner low. However, there's not enough money in the middle, so I will just let this one go. King 4-5-5. I will fold if any of these two raise. If Cartouche raises, I do have position, so I will make the call. He decides to limp, and I'm going to completely change it up and decide to raise, putting the pressure on him as he's shown a tight playing style. And again, I have somewhat been showing the same thing, so he should give me a lot more respect than he would probably show Jax or Makir here. And we're just going to be patient and wait through the bad cards. Jack 9 deuce 4 comes playable if he does raise. He doesn't, however, and Cartouche is now deciding to give me walks. Which you should take notice in your games, because if they are starting to call, they probably have a stronger range, given the past history of him limping, me raising, him calling, and then him just check folding. So he wants to avoid that from happening in the future, so he's going to tighten up his range. And now he could have a low draw, he could have a 6. Our deuce is counterfeited, so I don't really see too much reason to carry on here. Queen deuce deuce 3, I'm going to let go. Doesn't really have much high potential and is absolutely crushed by an ace 3 or ace deuce. And I do like Jack's 101 poker's bet on the river, just because it seems that Cartouche would pay him off with a wide range of hands, which include one pair type hands and lower 2 pair. On the sand, I'm just giving up. And he hits a flush. King 10, 7, 4. We're going to fold here. And David Chu decides to take position on me. We have a little bit of history, so this could be a little more interesting as he's more likely to 3-bet me light. Queen King 3, 4. Had he folded, I would have raised. With the raise, I will just fold. Now this video went into a different direction than which I had originally planned. However, I think if you don't adjust to the table conditions, then you are not playing optimally. So I hope you guys don't mind me taking it into a different direction, playing a little more tight. I will, however, try and show you the super aggro and isolation raises on my behalf rather than another player such as Jax 101 in one of my upcoming videos. Now King Jack 8-9 is worth a raise had he or sorry, is worth a call had he raised, only for the fact that it does hit well enough that if you hit, you most likely have the best hand, and if you miss, then it's pretty easy to let go. He decides to 3-bet. I have ace 9 3 7. I am out of position, and Cartouche, I'm not sure if he's raising light knowing that Jack's 101 or that he has a strong hand. However, being out of position, not a lot of straight draws, I'm going to just let it go. My ace high was not good. If we hit ace for aces up, it's most likely not going to be the best hand. So I think that is a good fold. Unfortunately, we don't get to see what he was raising with, but we'll just keep a note that he is starting to 3-bet Jack's 101. The other reason why I would opt to fold that is because if I remember correctly, it was Cartouche who raised out of position a 3-bet when three other players had called. And again, with no high potential, if there's an ace deuce out there, or there is a strong or even good chance that there is an ace deuce out there, then it should be a fold. Cartouche decides to limp under the gun. I dislike that for many reasons. It'll be interesting to see what he has. He might have a strong high equity hand, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a raise here. And I do very much like how he played post flop. I still think, however, that it should be a definite raise under the gun. And the reason is because you don't want 3-4s limping in. You don't want hands that can beat your low. You want to try and isolate it. This is a good two-way hand. You want to increase your chances of winning hand the most part. And if you have people with 3-4 coming in, then it completely kills the equity of your hand. Deuce 5 8 9. I will let go to a multi-way pot. David Chu 3-bets with what seems to be an aggression play to try and get a free card, given my experience with them. However, I might be wrong. He should have a full house here. Cartouche should have nut low with not much else. And I believe I was quite wrong. David Chu ends up having the third nut low with trips, and a flush draw ends up making a flush. And here I'm going to check. I am going to raise because I want to charge backdoor low draws as I don't have one the most I can. So I will raise here. And I don't mind 2 folds. The other reason why I like raising there is that because 2 is a common card in players' hands, if they have a deuce, most likely they will be involved. So when you have a full house, and it's very common that they do have a deuce, you want to increase the pot so they get as much bets in as possible. If he had a deuce, he might have even waited and raised me on the turn, in which case I could 3-bet him. So he decides to I'm going to fire again, and the only reason is I want to try and persuade hands like Jack Queen from calling and giving them a free card, and because I might have the best hand, I'm going to check behind, but I want to persuade those type of hands from calling as they do have good equity against my hand. I probably had the best hand. I do not want to bet though, and he ended up flopping a straight. However, if he had something like Jack Queen, he might have folded with flush being a good possibility with me continuing on with another bet. Jack Jack 5-6. I have a mediocre low, an open-end straight draw, jacks for a set, and a flush draw. I don't like leading because it is very possible that I could be losing on the low and my draws could be not as live as I think they'd be. But now that it's heads up, I believe that my equity has improved dramatically. The 6 does kill my hand somewhat. Sorry about my phone. I'll not pick that up. And here I will fold because it's very possible that he has a better low and my jacks aren't very strong to call down for the high portion. Sorry, going back to that last hand with the jacks, the reason why I don't like leading is because it could very fast and easily get out of control. It could go raise and 3-bet, and then I don't know where I am, and be forced to fold when I have a good share of equity. So David Chu decides to raise. I'm out of position. He decides to flat call. I'm going to flat, and the reason why I want to do so is that if a low comes, my ace deuce is very hidden, which allows Mikir to call down with a lesser low. Whereas if I raised and 3-bet out of position, playing the way I have, then it's much easier for him to put me on that type of hand and could get away from bad lows. So the play gets 3-handed now. King deuce 3-5, and I'm actually going to 3-bet if he raises. And I want to induce fear into the players right away, and I want to take control. So basically I want to assume the role that Jax had, which was pretty much table captain. So I'm going to check raise here if he decides to bet. And bet on the 8 as it's not too bad of a card. And if he does raise, I'm going to just call. So I ended up having queen 3 for top and bottom on the flop, and I picked up a better 2-pair on the turn. So here we have the nut low, and now I'm contemplating between check raising and betting. So I'm going to just bet. The only way that I could see him, I'm actually going to call it after this. So going back to that last hand, I was trying to decide if he would pay off Sorry again. So I'm going to check behind here and probably call here and not like it too much. So I'm going to call this the video. Sorry, I just wanted to address that last hand here before I wrap it up completely. Was that at this spot, there are a lot of hands that he might interpret as weakness and be able to bet, as he should have at least two pair or a pretty good low draw. So had I checked, there's a good chance that he would bet, allowing me to check raise. I don't see him ever checking behind a 3, so if he had a straight containing the 3, then he would probably bet and I could check raise him there. However, the only reason why I decided to bet here was that from time to time he might raise with a straight or an ace high, thinking that there's no way that I could have the ace 3 with an ace. So in the end I decided to bet. So I'm going to call the video here. I hope you guys gain some insight from aggressive play and isolation in 6max games. This is Shabam from StocksPoker.com, and I'll see you on my next vid.